This is a template for group technique. The relays used are RC, R1, and R2. Let us look at the relay RC alone. C stands for continuous. It is RC that allows the circuit to run continuously. When push button PB1 is turned on momentarily, that is without holding onto it, RC is turned on. RC continues to turn on even when push button PB1 is off. This is due to the use of the normally open contact in the relay RC. As shown as 1 RC in the template, and it is known as a latching contact which continue to supply current to relay RC to turn it on. Let us use what we have just learned and apply it to relay R1. R1 is turned on by this limit switch as drawn on the template. The use of 2 RC will be explained later. 1 R1 is used as latching contact to hold R1. However, only one relay, R1 or R2 can turn on at any one time. So when R2 is turned on while R1 continue to hold on by 1 R1, we must find a way to turn off R1 so that R2 is the only relay that turns on. To turn off R1 when R2 is on, it is done by normally closed contact 3R2 of R2 as shown in the template. That is, when R2 is on, the normally closed contact 3R2 becomes open, breaking the current flowing into R1 and turn off R1. Now that R2 is the only relay that turns on. To repeat the cycle, R1 is to turn on again by this limit switch, which is controlled by the last action of a given sequence. This again causes R2 and R1 to turn on at the same time. When R1 is again turned on, R2 is turned off by this special normally closed but held open limit switch, which is controlled by the last action of a given sequence, slightly different from the way R1 is turned off. R2 will again be turned on subsequently after R1. When the cycle continues, R1 and R2 will take turn to turn on and off, but only one relay can turn on at any one time. Each relay controls a certain actions under its charged, which will be discussed later. Let us now examine the use of 2RC and 3R1 which we did not cover earlier on. These two contacts are used for sequential control, that is, RC must turn on first, followed by R1, followed by R2 and the cycle repeats. R1 can only turn on provided RC is turned on first. That is 2RC is closed, then R1 is allowed to turn on together with the limit switch before it. Similarly, R2 can only turns on provided R1 is turned on. When R1 is on, 3R1 is closed and waiting for the limit switches drawn in the space just before 3R1, to also close and turn on R2. Please note by now the held open limit switch indicated by 1-2 here is closed after completing those actions under R1. It is alright that it might not be very obvious to you right now. Now that you know how R1 and R2 are turned on and off, let us examine the actions under the control of R1 and R2. When R1 is on, 2R1 on the template is closed. The action under the control of R1, for example, A+, B+, C+, will be executed sequentially. Similarly, when R2 is on, 2R2 on the template is closed. The action under the control of R2, for example, C-, B-, A-, will be executed sequentially. And the cycle continues. Finally, how to stop the continuous cycle. It is done by pressing the normally closed push button PB2. When PB2 is pressed, it breaks the current supply to relay RC, and RC is turned off. Please note this push button PB2 is not an emergency stop button. The cycle only stops after a full cycle is completed, that is, stopping after the last action is completed. Let us now recap. The continuous cycle is started by pressing PB1, and RC turn on. R1 is turned on by this limit switch, indicated by 1-4, which is a normally open but held closed due to the last action of the sequence. R2 is turned on by whatever limit switch or limit switch is drawn in this given space of the template. When R2 turns on, R1 is turned off by 3R2. R2 is turned off by this special normally closed but held open limit switch, which is controlled by the last action of a given sequence, slightly different from the way R1 is turned off. Finally, RC is turned off by PB2.